Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. How's everyone's Saturday going? How has your week been? Anything fun? Anybody have any fun Halloween costumes for this year? We're going to be getting started in a few minutes with a live watercolor class. Got matching t-shirts, just crafting at home this year. That's fun. What are you going to be crafting? We'll be getting started in about 4 minutes. We bought a bunch of pumpkins the other day and we painted them like all the planets. We're going to be decorating our front porch today with that for the trick-or-treaters tomorrow. If you're already on and kind of waiting to figure out what to set up, I'll go over this again in a few minutes, but things that you're going to need are going to be some watercolor paper. You've got a few options with this. I will be doing a few different things. We'll be practicing a little bit on this. I have one little piece of paper I've folded over to be kind of a nice little card. I might be doing some more in another big page, and I have another sketchbook. So if you wanted to use these as cards or name arrangement type things, you might want to consider actually doing these on a piece of paper you folded over so that you can either send it or totally blanking, or you can just kind of set it up to be a little place card, or you can just do it in your sketchbook. You're also going to need something round. And so I've got a couple different things here. This will actually give me a few different sizes for different size wreaths. These. I actually just finished that. I just finished this little sketchbook here where I put a bunch of watercolor papers in there. It's my, it's my first since like high school that I've bound like this. So that was quite a while ago. But I'm pretty excited about it. I still have a few more pages in my other sketchbook that I'm going to use first. Okay, so yeah, other than the paper, you're going to need some round stuff, which helps some. So you're going to need a pencil and some sort of an eraser. I'm going to be using a round brush for this. I've got some rags. And then today, I think I'm going to be using a combination of two different watercolors. So I'm going to use the Viva ones. And then I actually have my Koi set here. We'll be using those too. Oh my gosh, it's so easy to overthink everything in watercolor. I feel like that's the one. Of course. I'm happy to be here. We'll be getting started in just one more minute. I want to make sure that anybody who set the time and it reminds them right on time that they're not late to this. One more minute. Anybody doing anything fun for Halloween? Or if you carved a pumpkin, what did you carve it Learning how to use new brushes, that's fun. Oh, that sounds very sweet. Oh, I'm so excited that you're here. So for watercolor brushes, yeah, there are a ton of brushes you can use that are really fun to use. I mainly just use one just because I like to keep it a little bit simple. Good morning, good morning. All right, it is 11 o'clock. Let's get started. My name is Lacey Walker. I am the artist behind Rebel Unicorn Crafts, and most weeks we have a live watercolor class here that you can just follow along with. Today, what we're going to be doing are some fall themed wreaths. If you're not in a colorful fall scenario, you can just change the colors to be whatever is going to fit kind of the time of year where you are. For this class, we're going to need some paper, obviously. If you wanted to turn these into cards or little place settings, you're going to want some paper that you folded over so that you can do that there. You're going to need a pencil and an eraser and then some sort of round thing. So look around. You can grab a glass or a mug or some tape so that we can actually trace these. I'm not going to necessarily be taping anything down today, but I am going to be using my different tapes in order to use the round shapes because it's really hard to make a nice circle. I also have some different watercolors, and I'm going to mainly be using a round brush. This is a size 12 brush. The way these classes work is I typically paint a whole bunch of different things, and I talk through how I'm painting the different ones. If you've got questions and if I'm able to keep up with the comments, I'm happy to answer. So feel free to put questions and things in there, and if I can see it, I will answer it. If the other thing I really appreciate is people who come to my classes frequently. If you want to help me out, feel free and answer questions that I answer frequently in the comments. Okay, so I am going to tape one thing down, so I kind of lied, but and that's this little folded down one, just to make sure that it stays nice and folded over. So get set up with whatever supplies you're going to be using today. Today I'm going to be working with the Koi watercolor palette. It's a dried palette. And I think I'm going to do a few of these with the Viviva ones too, so you can see. In other fun news with Viviva stuff, I just finished filming like a longer YouTube type video for a class in case you bought the Viviva color sheets that you can watch and follow along with. And I'm thinking about in a week or two doing my live based on the Viviva ones so that you can follow along there too. All right, so this is the only one I'm going to be taping down today. Other than that, I will be working on this one. I'm probably going to do this one near the end because I want this one to be kind of a finished product. But the other ones I'm going to be doing in my sketchbook and on some other paper. But first, what I want us to do is just grab some paper. Let's actually just do this on this one. Or no, we can keep it here. It's fine. So a lot of times in my class, we work on an angle, but this one, we don't need to work on an angle quite as much because we're doing much smaller things and we want the water to kind of just sit and flow and different things. So don't need to worry about that quite as much. The very first thing I want us to do is actually just find a little space and let's practice a couple different types of leaves so that you can kind of see some different leaf shapes. You're brand new to watercolor and you just got a brand new set of dried paints. First thing you want to do is grab some water and just wet those so it's going to be easy to grab those colors. So I'm going to mix up a kind of nice orangey yellow type color. So I'm going to grab something like this orange and some of this yellow ochre type color here. Let's take a little of that kind of burnt sienna type color and let's actually add a little more of that yellow ochre so that you'll be able to see it. Other thing you might want to have handy is some little tester strips so that you can actually test what the color is going to look like on the paper. Yeah, that looks like a nice color. All right, so grab your paints. Next thing we're going to do is we're just going to get to know kind of some of these different leaf shapes, because there are a few different ways to make some leaves. So one of the easiest ones is to take a round brush, and all you're going to simply do is touch the tip to the paper here, push down a little bit and drag, and then as you pull, start to lift up, and that's going to make us a nice leaf. Then you can take the tip of this brush to kind of elongate the part that kind of connects the leaf to the branch. And you can kind of make these into a little, as if it's all the leaves on the branch. So start with the tip, drag, and pull down. Another little thing you can decide is whether or not you're going to have these be alternating or if they're going to touch kind of at the same spots. So that would touch at the same spot, or you could do the same thing. Let's start with our middle one here. And then we could actually alternate. So we want to make sure we pull this next one down a little bit further. That's our very first leaf. We can always go in and add some more details once that's dried. I'm going to change this color just a little bit. Let's turn it a little bit more red, just to have a little more differentiation between the different shapes. And another one that you can do that's pretty simple is you're going to do a two-stroke leaf. So the first part, you would do the same thing, but you're going to make it move over to the one side, like kind of like you're making a C. Then you're going to make a backward C, and that's going to give you a little leaf there. Again, we touch the tip, make a bit of a C, then on the other side, make that C backwards. That's another type of leaf there. You can actually take a variation on this if you wanted to. See how these ones we've left some white space? So you could make your C, and then you can intentionally leave a little gap there. And that's going to give it a little more dimension if you're looking for something like that. Just like that. All right, so there are 3 variations on the same type of leaves. Let's take it to a slightly more complicated type of leaf. And let's think about something like, how do the stems look gray? I don't know. It might just be the way it's coming through, because I'm using the same color on the whole thing. Let's take a look at something like a maple leaf, and I wonder if I actually have a maple leaf here. I don't know if you can just hear all the leaves crashing down. These are some leaves I collected at the park a little bit ago. They're a little bit crispy. But these maple type leaves, they're going to have 3 main parts to them, and then an extra part that's going to kind of flatten them out. And so these are, we're going to be working on smaller scale, so you kind of just have to get the general impression of these, and we're going to do this by just using the tip of our brush. Let's mix up a more greenish color. So I'm going to start with some of this kind of yellow-green, and then I'm going to grab some of this yellow ochre to mix in to keep it kind of on the end of the season spectrum of color. All right, so for this one, we're thinking about a maple type leaf. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that tip and I'm going to drag down. That's going to make the first point. Then I'm going to come over here, and this one is going to come about here, make another point, and another point. Then this is actually going to come out, and we're just going to make little points on each of these. And then you can make a final little point kind of down here and that stem. And that's going to give us kind of that maple type shape. Now, one of the things that's going to make this a little more magical, if you've got maple trees and it's turning seasons, go out and look at how they change. And some of them, they get this like really vibrant kind of red or pinkish color. And if you add that in while it's all still kind of drying, it can look super magical. Okay, there's a couple questions coming in first are any color mixing techniques for accurate color combinations? It's a great question. It is a complicated topic. One of the best things to do is practice with like a color wheel so you can understand how they're all going to affect each other, because you're going to want to figure out if you want the base to be a warm or cool color when you're mixing up different things. The second is to test your colors as you go and test them on something separate, because it's going to look a little different here. And also it just kind of serves as a little reminder for you to track where you're going. In general, so when I'm mixing up my fall colors, I don't want to use I don't really want to use these yellows that lean more towards the green. I'm going to be using the yellows that lean more towards the red side, and we want warmer colors. Even the greens, we're going to want them to be a little bit warmer leaning. Okay, the second question was about overloading your brush. That's a great, great question, because you're right. So let's say I tried to mix up, I'm going to try to overload my brush a whole bunch with a bunch of color. And let me try to redo that maple again, and so you can see what happens if I've got way too much. It's going to, let's put even more in my brush. Oops. Now if I'm trying to control this, it's going to be more difficult. I can't get that same definition. It's going to be really, really difficult to do this. So first thing, take your brush. If you've got most brushes will do this. The round brush is really good at this though. Tap it off so it's dry. And you can see that you can actually suck up the extra water here. So let's say, oh no, I went way too much on this one. I can actually come in and kind of salvage this. I have to make it a little bit bigger once I start to control how much water is in my brush initially, but I'll be able to kind of save it. Best way to kind of control, the tester strips are great for this too. So when you get in some color in your brush, kind of just make some strokes here. Make sure it's not overloaded. If you've got way too much, you can just barely touch the tip of your brush off to kind of suck out a little bit of that. So again, if I had this really overloaded and I'm like, okay, that's really flowing around, all I need to do is just tap my brush off over here, and now that's going to help me control the amount that's in there. Yes, you can also use a paper towel. Great tip. Okay, so we did some maple ones. Some other ones are like an oak type leaf, kind of like this. We're not going to be quite this intricate because, I mean, you can. If you want to get this intricate, please do. But I recommend keeping it a little bit simple, because you're going to kind of still be able to see what it's meant to be, even if it's not exactly accurate. Okay, let's make a little darker green. Oh, I got a lot of that viridian. And this is one thing where I was talking about, we don't want things that are going to be too cool colors. So like this is a pretty cool color, blue or green, because it leans a little bit more towards the blue side. So in order to warm this up, I've got a couple options. One, I can just add in something like this burnt sienna, which is going to make it a little bit more of a brown type green. But it's going to cool that down, and it's going to look a lot better with those other colors. Okay, so now we're thinking about the maple one. And the best way to do this is to start with the tip. Again, you're going to want to kind of double check how much color you have in your brush. And part of this, if you're struggling with how much water do you have in your brush, you're not alone. It's like what happens for the majority of the beginning of your watercolor experience. You're going to get to know it a little bit more and be able to kind of trust how much you have in. It'll still surprise you sometimes. But we're going to start with the tip of the brush. I'm just going to make a little kind of rounded top part. Then I'm going to bring this down a little bit, and then I'm going to make little hearts, basically. Come down, make another little heart. And one more. It's okay if they're a little bit sharp or not super smooth, because it's a leaf. And that's going to give us kind of that oaky type shape. Now, one of the reasons I do talk about really only needing one brush, because yes, I made that one that big, but with a really good tipped brush, We can also make this way smaller. Just like this. So when you are looking for a round brush, that's what you want to look for, is one that's got that super, super fine point, because it's going to allow you to work really small. You might even be able to go smaller than that. Just a little bit. I could probably go smaller if I really focus, but I don't feel like doing that right now. Anyways, you can go smaller and smaller with it. So those are our main leaf type shapes that we're going to use. Oh, another fun one, actually, one more thing. If you're into adding wheat, if you like kind of the wheat look of the season, what you can do is take kind of a nice yellow ochre color, maybe add in a little bit of like a burnt sienna or a red, just to give it a little more warmth to that yellow. The brush size I am using is a 12. And then this is pretty simple. All you're going to do is, again, make sure you don't have way too much on your brush. You're going to tap, and then you just tap next to each other. And then make a line, and that's going to give you a little wheat stalk. Like that. If you add in a few more. And yeah, exactly like that one comment said, no two leaves are the same. Same thing with any of the stuff in nature. They can all have a little variation. Okay, let's go back over here, and let's talk about having some variation, because we're going to be using some of these same shapes over and over again. Actually got some leaf particles on there now. But we can actually make them look a little bit different depending on how we want them to look. So we can go back in and add details. We can also emphasize or de-emphasize the tips and different things like that. So we could come in here with a slightly darker color. Let's take a little of this kind of burnt sienna color in just the tip of the brush. And you could make little lines. Oops, I went a little too far. Okay, my lines are a little off, but you can do that. You can even do the same thing with these ones if you wanted to, where you add in the lines here. And I mean, you could come in and actually add some of those kind of veins that run through the leaves, or even leave them how they are. What about an aubergine? So as far as I know, aubergine is, I thought that was an eggplant, but is that a type of tree? Okay. Now, one other fun thing, because if we're doing fall leaves, before we really get in this, like the last thing I do is we can take kind of a brown color, and let's say we make a leaf. Let's just make one of these kind of leaves here. If you wanted to, while it's still wet, come in and add in some really bright colors to really show the leaves changing. You can absolutely do that too, and that will add in some fun variation. And this will kind of, as it dries, it will change a little bit. Okay, so let's actually kind of get started on some of these. First one I'm going to do, I'm going to grab this. This is just a 9x12 book. Oh, good. I'm glad that you're here. So this is a Koi watercolor palette. I'm also going to be playing around with the Viva sheets too, so you can see those as well. So the first thing I'm going to do to actually start a wreath itself is I'm going to grab something round. It doesn't have to be tape, whatever's going to fit your surface, but I'm going to then trace in here. I just want to get my circle so that I know which direction I'm going, or I know kind of where to follow. Now, if you are doing this, I'm going to keep mine pretty late, or pretty dark here. But if you're doing this on your own, you're going to want to come back in and really tap off a bunch of that pigment so that you don't see, or a bunch of the graphite so you don't see it through as much. You could also use a watercolor pencil for this so that you can make it kind of blend into the background, but I'm going to keep mine fairly prominent so that you can actually see it. Maybe I'll even retrace it just so that we can really make sure and see. There we go. I think you can see that a little better. Then what we're going to want to do is I want to look at a couple of these. When you're making your wreaths, you can kind of choose to make them go all the way around in one direction. See how all those leaves follow kind of the same direction? Whereas on this one, I have a focal point and then it moves out from either of those. So we'll do one of each of those today. I'm going to start with this one where I'm going to kind of pick a focal point, because I always find this one a little easier because you don't actually have to connect the two together. And so it's a little less like a puzzle piece type thing. We can actually keep some kind of open space at the top if we want to. And these little leaves, if anybody is good at hand lettering, I am terrible at it, just for the record, but inside of these wreaths is perfect to write a little fun message. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of make a mental note of where I want my little focal point to be. I'm going to make mine about here. That's going to be my general area where I'm going to be kind of moving in either direction. And you could do something in this focal point like a pumpkin or an acorn, or in this one I just did these little like berry type things, because those little berries are really good space fillers. Okay, so I'm going to start, again, I'm going to mix up a color. I need to grab another tester strip. I know I've said the tester strip thing a few times, but one other thing I'm going to show you is this was like a experimental thing I did on this side. I just cut it up and I'm going to use the other side. So you don't have to buy new paper for tester strips. You can just use old experiments and things like that. Okay, so I want this to be a little bit more pigmented than what I have here. So I am putting in some orange, there's some yellow ochre, some burnt sienna, and a little bit of kind of like a golden yellow. Ooh, this might be a nice color. Ooh, that's a good one. I like that color there. And the first thing I'm going to do is we also want to make sure we move this so that it's going to work with how we want to actually work on this. So I'm going to start with, this is my focal point, so I'm going to be moving out from either of these directions, or the leaves are going to, their tips are going to be facing kind of away from my focal point on this one. I'm going to start with this kind of nice bright golden orange color. And this is going to be that simple leaf we talked about at first, where we simply just take the tip, press, drag, and lift up. And you can work, you could either start with kind of where you're going to end with this, or you can start from the bottom, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to try to have my leaves be a little bit alternating, so I'm going to mark in where those stems are. And again, if you drew yours, make sure you draw your circle lighter than what I did. I did that on purpose, though, so that you can see. And I'm just going to make a few of these. Some of them you want to kind of change the direction that they face. Maybe this one kind of comes out this way. I'm going to leave that one like that. So this is, I am going to bring this up further. You could choose to bring this all the way up, or you can leave a gap, because I kind of want to put in some other types of leaves on this one too. And then I'm going to work in this direction away from it. So again, I'm going to move my paper so that it's easier for me and with the direction of my hand. Do yourself as many favors as you can with this, because you can kind of, if I tried to work like this, things are going to look a little bit different. Okay, there's my first one. Put in that stem. And on this side, I think I am going to go up a little bit further. I'm starting to run out of color in my brush. I need to grab some more. I'm going to make 2 more leaves. Just like that. Some of them you can have connect, some of them don't have to connect. Oh, I'm having some focus issues. Sorry about that. Am I frozen? I might be frozen. I don't know why I cannot focus my camera. Sorry about this, guys. There, focus, focus, stay focused. There we go. There we go. I hope that's better. Better. Good. I'm glad I'm not frozen. I wasn't sure because every time I tapped, nothing was happening. All right, so we did that. Actually, I don't know. I'm going to put one more leaf in. Now I'm seeing it again. There we go. Okay, so this is where our focal point's going to be. Let's add in some variety of leaves. So let's actually mix up kind of a different green type color. I'm going to start with some of that kind of lemon yellow. I'm going to add in some of that yellow ochre. Let's just double check what that color looks like now. I'm going to add in, I think this is, oh no, that's that Viridian. I was thinking that was a sap green. It's not. I'm going to add in a little more of the yellow green, a little more of that yellow ochre. Let's see what that color, there we go. That will be a nice color as kind of a complement. And then let's add in some of those second ones that we talked about. Now, we kind of want to fit some of these in. Some of these will become their own parts, but I like to also distribute these kind of throughout. So if you look here, see how these do come out, kind of the top of those longer ones, but on some of them I kind of fit them in. And you can choose how much you actually want to fit these in. So maybe this one here, we're going to make that C. Maybe that one falls right in here. Let's make another one here. You can absolutely do this whole wreath with just the same ones if you're liking how that looks. Okay, I'm going to take a little break where there's going to be 3 here, and then let's make at least one over here. And let's fit this in a few spots here. If you have way too much sitting there, it's going to dry a little funny. Sometimes I like how that looks, but I can actually suck up a little bit. Ooh. See, here's why you want to move your page, because I did not do myself any favors there. There we go. That's a little better. Let's put one here. So again, moving this. And let's put one over here too. You can put yours wherever you want, wherever they're kind of fitting, because the way you did your leaves is probably going to be a little bit different than the way I did mine, your initial ones. So feel free to make some changes. Now I'm paranoid that I'm going to be out of focus for the rest of class. We're going to keep this one a little bit simple because it's the first one we're painting together. So the next thing I want to actually do is I just want to add in some of those kind of red berries. Think like almost like those crabapple type things. So I've got a red here. This is a little bit too bright of a red. Let's tone that down by adding in something more like a crimson. And let's add in a little burnt sienna just to kind of neutral it out a little bit. That should be a nice color. And then for this, I'm just going to add in some of those little berries. So I'm just going to make some little marks. I'm kind of avoiding the areas where I've already painted because some of those are still a little bit wet. But if you want to, or if you think yours are dry enough, you can go ahead and actually add those right on top. And let's add them in a couple of different places. There's a couple here. Maybe there's one here. We're just kind of trying to add balance. When you look at yours and you see an area that you think, oh, that's a boring area, pop some little color in there. Oh, I'm so excited that you got your first watercolor set. It's so fun. Pop in some different colors. All right, so I am feeling like mine is a little bit unbalanced here, so I'm going to add some of those first leaves again, kind of over this way and make these almost touch together. You can fill yours in. Actually, let's put one here too. Let's make it a little bit longer than those other ones. And I'm going to add one more of those green ones here too. And one more of the green ones here. So take a look at yours and see where you kind of feel like you need to fill in a few gaps. Fill those in accordingly. Okay, so you could totally leave this wreath here as it is. If I just erase this little line here, I mean, again, make sure you draw lighter, but that will definitely bring that together. We have some other options on how to finish this wreath off though. First thing I want to do is let's just grab kind of a brown color, whatever brown you've got on your palette. We don't need this to be too, just kind of a nice twig type color. And then this one you really do want to tap your brush off because you want to be able to make a super thin point, because we're going to kind of connect some of these together. Make them feel like they're actually part of a branch. You don't need to do too much. We just want to kind of add in some little details that make them feel like they're not just floating. Or, well, you don't have to do this part, but this is what I like to do. And that's going to bring them together a little bit. All right, another option we have, we can actually do a couple different things to the leaves. We talked a little bit about adding in kind of those center seam stems, and I'm going to do that on this one. I'm just going to darken my color I used on those kind of orangish leaves just a little bit. Don't need it to be a huge amount. And then on the ones that are dry, you do want to wait for these to be dry, otherwise it's just going to kind of flow in. And just make little center marks. On these, if you want to. If you feel like they need something extra. If you're like, I kind of like how they are as they are, just leave them. And there, that's going to give us a little bit more definition on some of those leaves. But let's look at something else we can do. Yes, we can add those stems and we can add some of those veins, but we also have another option where you can just fill in half of the leaf with kind of a darker color, just to kind of make it seem like one that maybe kind of wants to fold in half. So here's our main color. Let's make it a little darker by adding in some more pigment. And then I already mixed up this green down here that's a little darker. I'm just going to grab a little bit of that to mix in. Don't need a ton. And then we can just take and put on 1/2 of this, the darker color. Just try your best to just meet it up. This needs to be a little darker so that you guys can see this. In person, you can see the difference, but it's a little bit harder, I think, on here. So I'm going to take it a little darker. Do your best to match it up so it's just half of it. And I feel like that always gives them a little more dimension too, just taking it and covering half. You can also use this to disguise if you have some areas that dried a little weird, like this one. If I add this half in here, now it didn't dry weird because you can't see it. Sometimes with watercolor, you just have to do yourself some favors. Because the paint doesn't always want to do what you want it to do. And that's one of the beautiful things about watercolor. Okay, so there's our first little wreath. That one's a pretty simple one. Let's actually do our next one. I'm going to do the same size. So I think I'm going to be doing 3 total wreaths today. I'm going to do this one here. I'm going to do one more here. And then I'll do a final one that's a little bit smaller on my little card so that we can see it. So again, I'm going to start by tracing out a circle here. And mine's going to be dark. If you're tracing out a circle, make sure you erase or draw really lightly so you can't see it so much. And we just did one where we took a focal point and we moved away from it. But on this one, let's just go all the way around in the same direction. So we're going to be moving in kind of a circle with this. And so that we have some of the same elements, let's start with kind of that orange type color. And let's start with some of those same types of leaves that we started with, just because they're kind of a nice filler leaf. And you can start at any point. You can maybe play around with making yours longer or thinner. Connecting them. And I'm just going to move this around. I'm going to put this in a few different spots. I think I'll do 5 leaves on my first part of this. Okay, now I'm going to leave a little gap, but I'm going to keep kind of just twisting this around so it's moving in the same direction. But I'm going to leave a little gap, and I think I'm going to do 3 on this one. I'm just going to vary. Oops. Moogie wants to paint with us today. Little Moogie here. Did 3. Let's do 4 on this one. Okay, so I've kind of filled out, some different shapes in here, and now I can go in and I can add in some other things. Let's do, do you want to do add in some maples, or do you want to do the oak ones? Let me know in the comments. And then also, what color leaf do you want it to be? Okay, one for oak, maple, both. Okay, I think oak is just eking out. Nope, now it's tied again. Oh no. All right. We're going to do both. We're going to do both on this. Let's start with, what do I want to start with? Let's start with the red maple. Okay. So I'm going to, over here, I'm going to mix up more of kind of a reddish, kind of muted color. So starting with some of this kind of crimson type color. And there is some of this green next to it, which will darken it. So I'm going to grab some of that, because green and red are on kind of the same, or on the opposite sides of the color wheel. So they will mute each other. But I want it to be a little bit more red. Let's check that. Oh, that should be a nice color. All right, so this is going to be the maple one. So I'm going to figure out where I want those to be. I think one would fit in really nicely here. So I'm going to start with this one. Again, I'm going to take just the tip of that brush. I'm going to start kind of making the pattern. So it's going to follow kind of this type of a pattern in general. So I'm going to make that like kind of weird star, St. Patrick star here. And then I can actually kind of widen each of these. And then I can add in those kind of details. Oops. I left my brush in water overnight and the tip is not thanking me for that. There's a little maple leaf. You can make yours bigger, you can make yours smaller. Okay, I'm going to add another maple leaf in somewhere else. Let's put this one right over here. Again, I'm going to start kind of making that. There's some drag racers apparently near the roundabouts today. You guys are hearing that noise, that's what that is. Yeah, we live close to a couple of roundabouts, and some people like to turn them into fun. Okay, so we start with the main structure, and then we're just going to kind of fill that in and balance this a little bit. Then make the little having the same issue with your brush tip. So I'm going to try something. Somebody, I don't recommend this yet because I have not tested this. But somebody did mention you could use like a flat iron to reshape the tips. The other thing you can do is, all right, so if you're having trouble with the tip of your brush, when you go to let it dry, one of the things you can do is make sure you just really spin it. And if you let it dry in that position, if you get a nice tip, that will help to kind of re-salvage it. You can also use like some dish soap to let it dry in it, or you could use kind of like a starchy solution and then just wash it out. But if you let it dry, it will kind of salvage it. But it's not something I can solve right now. Okay, let's add in one more maple leaf here. Thinking right over here. Yeah, the only reason why I don't recommend trying that flat iron trick until I test it, well, I mean, or you can test it if you're not worried about ruining your brush. But since all these different fibers are a little bit different, like this one I'm using is a synthetic fiber. So I don't know for sure that it wouldn't burn. Again, we're starting with kind of a star that's flattened on the bottom. Adding in some details. Throwing that stem in there too. Okay. So other people wanted the oak one too. Let's do the oak one, and I don't know what color the oak ones really turn when they turn. So we can take some creative liberties with this one. What color do you want the oak leaves to be on this one? Yeah, exactly. Synthetics are typically kind of a plastic material, so it might... Sorry. I have a bit of a runny nose today. Blended. Okay, so let's do some blend. Let's do like a green to a brown blend. Okay, so like a dark. Okay, cool. Huh. All right, getting a lot of different answers. Let's go with a greenish color for the oak leaves, but we're going to drop in some yellows and some browns into it. You can choose to drop in whatever colors you want to, if you want to modify yours. All right, I'm gonna wash my brush off. I'm gonna add some more water into this little well so I've got enough. And then I'm going to grab, let's start with a little of this Viridian color. Let's add in some of that yellow-green color. Let's add in a little of this yellow ochre to warm it up just a little bit. And then let's add in a teeny tiny bit of that burnt sienna. Don't want too much. There we go. That's kind of a nice color. This is going to be one where we're going to be dropping in a bunch of different colors, and we're going to add in these oak leaves kind of wherever we want to. I feel like I want my first one to be here-ish. So again, you can start from the bottom or the top, and I might actually start from the bottom on this one just to make sure that I'm going to be able to fit the bottom here. So I'm going to start with that first little kind of heart type shape. You can make yours a little bigger or a little bit smaller depending on how big in proportion to the rest of this you want this to be. And I'm going to build these little hearts on top. Then I'm going to round it. And this one I'm not being so careful with how much water I have, because the next thing I want to do is let's just grab some of this burnt sienna and let's just pop this in. Let's just let it kind of flow around. Maybe also grab some of this yellow ochre, pop that in a couple places. Let it move around. If you need to, you can kind of use the tip of your brush to suck up some color if you're like, that's a little bit too much. But that kind of looks nice. I think I'll leave mine about like that. You know what? I'm going to put another one right kind of next to it. I'm going to start with the bottom again too, just to make sure that it fits in there. Because I kind of know where I want the bottom to fit. Start with that heart type shape. I need a little more water on my brush for this one because I do want this to be nice and wet so that when I add in those other colors, making hearts. And rounding the top. And let's drop in some of that burnt sienna in a few places. And that yellow ochre too. And if you need to, you can kind of move it around. I think I need a little more of that burnt sienna down here. You could even drop in a little bit more of the green if you're like, oh, I lost all the green and I want some of that. Just like that. And then I'm going to move around, and I think I'm going to add one in I'm going to add one in right here. I actually need to mix up a little bit more of that green because I just pretty much ran out. So that was that Viridian color, the yellow-green color, the yellow ochre color, and a little bit of that burnt sienna. A little more of that yellow-green. And that's about the same color we did before. So this one's going to come here. Again, I want to start with the bottom. I'm finding it easier to start with, like usually if I'm just painting these leaves, I would start with the top, but I'm finding it easier to start with the bottoms to make sure they fit in where I want them to on this painting. Just hearts and then a swoop on the top. And then for this one, we're dropping in both that yellow ochre in a couple areas and some of that burnt sienna color. And just moving it around a little bit. Let's add in one more of those maple leaves somewhere down over here. Or actually, I want mine to kind of go in. Which direction do I want mine to go? Let's make it move kind of in this direction. Huh. Let's go in this direction here. Starting with the little first heart. And if you have a light enough color like this one, you can definitely overlap a light enough color behind it. If that color was a lot darker, you'd really be able to see that leaf through it. Hearts. And a top swoop. You could leave more space. There are a ton of different types of oak trees. So your leaves, if you're like, that doesn't really look like an oak tree leaf to me, you might have different oak trees near you. If you look up different ones, some of them are more rounded. Some of them, like even the ones that I technically have around me, they're a lot larger on the top part. So you're going to see a lot of different types of oaks. And you can adjust yours accordingly to kind of fit the look that you're going for. But a lot of these like little wreath type things, we're just creating the illusion of kind of what we want. I actually feel like to balance this out, I need one more oak leaf kind of over here. It just feels kind of unbalanced to me. Starting with the main heart, adding those little hearts on. And that top too. Dropping in my other colors. Burnt sienna, yellow ochre, letting those move around, grabbing some of that pigment back up, letting it sit. Okay, 2 questions. First, can I add in some of the wheat? Sure, let's add in some wheat to this one. We're gonna add in wheat and, I mean, I guess, yeah, I can add in the wheat. I don't know if the wheat's gonna look great with the maples for some reason, but that's just a personal opinion. We'll definitely put it in. And then there's a question about when using it for cards. So I typically make my cards out of this is actually a piece of watercolor paper I folded over. Okay, yeah, let's hold off on the wheat. Maybe I'll do the wheat on the other one, on the one that I'm going to put down on this other one, because I'm going to do a third one. Okay, because I'm actually feeling like I need some kind of bright greens in here, kind of, you know those ones that are kind of yellow green when they turn in the fall? Yeah, an acorn would be good on this one. I don't know if I've actually painted an acorn before. We might add in some of those at the very end. Let's go with some kind of bright type leaves. So I'm going to start with this green base, but I'm going to add in a bunch more of this yellow green and a lot more of this yellow ochre. I just want some more brightness here. Let's just check on what that color is. I need some more water as well. And let's take a little more of this kind of golden color too. I need another tester strip. A little more of this golden color. Kind of like a permanent yellow type color. There we go. That's nicer. So I have some or chestnuts are green with spikes. That's cool. I think I have some acorns actually over here that I've been wanting to paint because when I was collecting my leaves, but I kind of want to put some filler leaves in. We don't want to overcomplicate overcomplicate as much as you want, but at this point, what I want to do is just kind of fill this in to balance the colors and make sure that it's kind of equally filled in. So I'm going to be using some of these type of leaves. That's really good to have these leaves just kind of in your back pocket so that you can just fill in. Some of these filler ones are going to be really helpful to kind of completing the composition and making it feel a little bit more balanced. Maybe one of those comes up this way. The wreaths are really fun to paint because everybody comes out with slightly different results depending on how they like to kind of balance and place and which ones they choose to put in or keep out. But to me, when I add in something like this, it's just going to kind of fill that up and make it feel a little more balanced. You want to drop in some yellow into the these green ones? Let's try that while they're still wet. Dropping in, ooh, that's going to be way too much yellow. I think I kind of missed the boat on that. They had dried enough. Sorry. I think that's a great idea, though. So I kind of smooth these out since I added that in really unevenly. Okay, moving this around, figuring out where I want to add in more of these leaves. So I smoothed it just with a with more of the color I initially used. There's a little bit brighter yellow in those. Still not quite wet enough though. Keep moving this around. Keep adding in and filling those gaps. Until you feel like it's kind of balanced. There. I quite like that. Let's leave that one pretty much how that is. Now I can go back in, and I will in a little bit. Everything's still a little bit too wet to add in any more details to those where I want to add in our line work. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to switch over to my Viviva colors. You can do the same things with whatever watercolors you're using, but just in case anybody is using the ones on the class today, I want to show you how they're going to work a little different. And I'm going to do that on the one that I'm going to be painting as a little card. And then we'll come back and we'll revisit this one and we'll add in some line work on that too. Okay, so this one's a little bit smaller. So I'm going to find something smaller that's circular. Whatever you have around is going to work just fine. Like here's also some masking fluid. I wanted to have a slightly larger. No, they're about the same. But you can just find some different round things around you. And then you just want to make our little circle. Oops. I'm thinking of this one as more like a, not that I really do this. When I plan like little dinner parties, it's all about making good food more than it is making things pretty for me. I err on the side of yummy. But this would be really cute as like a little place card. Thank you guys for helping each other out in the comments. I really appreciate that. And so this one's going to be a lot smaller. And if you did have a smaller brush, like a size 8 or something like that, that might be better to use here. I'm going to challenge myself and try to use the smaller one or the bigger one here. Just because I typically say, so I should, that you only need one brush. So if I say that, you should be able to use only one. For those of you who are unfamiliar, these are Viviva color sheets. You can buy these from a bunch of different places. I do have a little partnership with them, so you can also buy them from my site, and it's a little kind of co-branding type thing. But the way these work are they are colors that are on different sheets here, and they're super duper pigmented. So you have to work a little bit different with them. So that's why I want to show you guys on these ones. But there's this little mixing panel. Attach that if you haven't already done that. If you do have some of these, because it's super handy. We can actually mix on there in real time. I need to wipe mine off, so I'm just going to wet my paper towel here. Then I can just remove that pigment from here, and now it's good for me to go ahead and paint whatever colors I want on it. Okay, so we've got our circle. And on this one, I said I would do some wheat stuff, so let's do some wheat stuff. Let's start with the wheat. And I'm going to actually start by mixing up a little bit of this like chrome yellow. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that, put it here, grab a little of that yellow ochre, mix those together. And I want this to be a little bit more on the red side, so I think I'm going to grab just a teeny amount of that burnt sienna. Mix that in, and let's just test out that color to see what it is. That'll be a nice color on there. Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. Okay, one more thing I need you guys to vote on. Do you want this wreath to go around, or do you want it to have a center point where it kind of branches out from either direction? So round or center point? All right, we've got quite a few centers right away. Center point it is. So again, I'm going to keep that center point. I don't know why. I just always lean to having the center point kind of over here on off-centered on one side. Let's start with our little wheat pieces. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I mixed up that color using a couple of these different little Viva colors here. And for the wheat, I am going to tap this off a little bit. I hope you guys can still see my circle, but it's pretty dark. Okay. All right. Wow. You guys have totally agreed on this one. I don't think there were anybody who said anything other than center point, at least that I saw. Okay. So for the little wheat, we start with a little tip here, and then we just make little marks. And then we're going to make a long stem. Let's make a few because it was kind of like a little bunch. Change so that they're a little bit different heights. Maybe there's a shorter one here. We can add in some of that wheat there. I'm going to leave that one like that for now. I'm going to wash my brush off. And then what type of leaves do we feel like would fit best with the wheat? Do we want kind of the... I was thinking something like this would look nice with it, but I'm open to, do you want the longer ones? Do you want the more rounded ones? What ones do you think work well with wheat? Any. I think I know I want it to be kind of a reddish brown color. And let's go with those kind of thinner ones. So in order to get a reddish brown color, I am going to start with some of this burnt sienna color here. Just going to scribble that off over here. And then I'm going to wash my brush just so I don't contaminate. I won't contaminate too much, but just to make sure. I'm going to take some of this vermilion. That's going to give us a super bright color. Get my tester strip so we can see that. I want this to be a little bit deeper. I do like that color, but that's not quite what I wanted. Long skinny, perfect. Take some of this crimson, put that in there. And that's a little bit closer to what I was wanting. If you wanted to tone this down a little bit, you could take just a little bit of this burnt umber and put that in there. Oh yeah, that's a nice color. There we go. And I did those thin enough that I can actually just paint over some of those stems a little bit. So I'm going to do that to kind of incorporate some of these together. So I am going to start with a long skinny one here. Oops. If you need to, you can adjust a little bit. Okay, so I've moved my center point just a little bit for the record. Okay, so now my center point is actually here. So now I'm going to turn. I briefly forgot what I was doing. If yours are settling a little bit strange before it dries too much, you can always take another pass on these if you're not liking the way those settle. But now I want to change so that we've got a slightly different center. Center point's actually going to be closer to the center here. And let's move in this direction. Every once in a while, I just forget just what I'm doing for just a second. Yeah, it does make really good lavender. You're right. That's kind of the thing is once you start painting with watercolor, you're going to start to see like, oh, a lot of these shapes just kind of repeat. I'm going to stop messing with those leaves because I can add some more details. I think I'm going to leave it mainly just that wheat here, and I'm going to add the wheat in a few different areas too. Or should I put another one here? Oh, let's add another one. Here, at least if this ruins it, at least then you know not to do this. I could go either way with that. It's not my favorite, but it's not the worst. I'm adding one more here. Now I want to go back to adding in some of that wheat to add this in a few different areas. So yeah, you can definitely, here's the little trick is you can do these same wreaths, just change the colors a little bit and they would be springy. So rather than wheat, you could do some lavender, and these long ones could be really bright greens to kind of be springish. And so a lot of these lessons, you can always do something else with them too. Okay, so let's add in some more of that wheat. I'm going to mix up a little more of that color. I did that chrome yellow plus this yellow ochre. And then I did some of this burnt sienna. Maybe a little bit more. Test that. There we go. Let's add in some of that wheat here too. I should have thought about my center point a little bit more here. It's getting towards the end of class. You can definitely tell because my brain stops working quite so well. Let's put in one here too. Yeah, I'm not super happy with the composition of this one, but you know, we're going to try to make this work. So I definitely recommend going a slightly different direction than what I'm doing. If you're like, ooh, that's not how I wanted that to look. Me neither. And all right, I'm going to try to salvage this by putting a pumpkin right here. Can I zoom in for a second? Sure, you can see this. This is not my favorite, but this is what it is right now. Let's put a pumpkin in it. Let's try to fix this one because this one it's looking directionless for sure. Our focal point is now going to become a pumpkin. I'm going to change this color here. Let's add some vermilion. Oops, I should have washed my brush. Let's wash it, and I've got a little on there, so I can just take some of that off. Now we've got a pretty bright orange. Let's take a little bit of this pink color to make it a little more orangey. Let's add in a little pumpkin. Here, maybe I might need to make this darker, but I'm going to start with a little pumpkin. Just going to make an oval. I'm going to make little C shapes on it. This would be better if this were a little more vibrant. Just going to grab some more of those colors. I highly recommend changing yours so that it has a little more direction than this one. This is not my favorite, but that's okay. That's all right. Half the time I feel like when I mess up on live, you guys learn more than when I don't mess up. Let's put a little stem in there. And let's add our little loop. Woo! And then I'm going to let this dry for a second because I want to add in some more details with some line work that I think is going to help kind of salvage this. But I need everything to dry for a bit. And I did say I was going to go back and add some line work onto this one. And this one I didn't use the Viviva on. You can technically use the Viviva on top of these other watercolors too, but I'm just going to stick with this. So let's add in some different line work on some of these. So I think I'm actually going to flip. So these ones here, my long ones, are going to be the ones where I'm just going to put color on half of it. This is also a great exercise for if you're trying to get better at precision placement and your brush work. Challenge yourself. Allow yourself to go out of the lines a little bit. It's okay. It's okay if it happens. But kind of practicing this and putting it into work is going to help you. So I'm making this color just a little bit darker. It'll stand out a little more. And on these long ones, it's going to be the ones where I'm going to try to just cover just half. I need a little more color. And in general, I usually try to cover the same half. But you can alternate if you want. You need to, you can suck up some of that extra water. The way that you have to push your brush down for this, it's going to always leave a little bit extra water on one side, and then that can cause some weird drying, but it can also be really beautiful, that weird drying. Just depends on what you like. Just putting this on half. And half, half, and half. There we go. I already feel like that's created more dimension. But let's go in and let's add in a little bit of detailing to those oak type colors. Now you could go in with, actually let's add in a whole nother element to this. Just in case anybody wants to. So if we actually look at these oak leaves, see how the veins themselves are a little bit lighter? You can do them darker. Nobody's going to really care. Just adding in some of those dimensions. But you could also take something like a white gel pen. And this is where we could add in some details with something like this. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I'm going to add some details on some other stuff, but I just like to show you guys a few different options. I think this looks kind of cute with the white detailing. You could always, if you don't want to add in with your brush, you can always just use a normal pen too to add in details. That could be pretty as well. On our little maple leaves, let's add in some more details. So I'm actually going to take these two colors. It's going to be that red and that super dark green, and that's going to give us a kind of a purplish color. That's going to be the color I use for my details. So technically you can If you have a thick enough paper, you can actually scratch into the paper with like an X-Acto knife. I don't do that very often. Just adding in some of those. Err on the side of like too few details than too many, because your brain likes to finish things. And I feel like with a few of those little added details, that really kind of brought that together. You don't need to do too much. All right. Hopefully this is dry enough for me to add some details. I don't know why, but this one cracks me up here. It's okay. I just dropped my palette. Made a bit of a mess, but that's okay. That's why this room, I tore the carpet out and it's just concrete. The ones I haven't turned out, yeah, exactly. Those different, the sloppy outlines, I love that. I am going to add in, I feel like I need one more piece of wheat over here. So first, let's do that, because I feel like that's going to just make me feel a little better about it. And I'm just combining these colors here, and then that burnt sienna to get my little wheat color. Let's add this one in here. And add that in there. It makes me feel a little better. Not quite as good as I wanted it to be. Yeah, your brain likes to kind of be teased with things. It likes to complete the puzzle. So sometimes it's better to leave a little more to the imagination. All right, next I'm going to take this vermilion color and I'm going to kind of make these outlines a little bit more clear on this pumpkin. This is not the best pumpkin I've ever done, but it sure looks a lot better now. Okay, that does look, I'm feeling better now. It's not perfect, but this is all kind of working a little bit better. That was not quite dry enough to really add this detail on, but it was still a little wet at the bottom, but that's okay. It still looks a little better. And then let's add in, let's force some of this darkness. Like let's actually take this color that we used for these and let's make it almost more purpley by adding in some purple. There we go. Make it darker. And let's add in those half details we did before in that other one. Just to kind of bring a little more dimension to this. I'm going to try not to touch this pumpkin at all because it's still quite wet. Okay, I feel like this is helping to salvage this painting. Still not my favorite one, but I don't hate it as much as I did just a minute ago. Okay, yeah, it could be better, but I feel like I made it less bad. All right, I think that's pretty much all I have for today. So here are the 3 ones we painted. I am going to try to take this off. This is still pretty wet, so I need to do this a little carefully because that pumpkin's going to want to splash around. But I just want to show you what I was doing with this in case you joined late. So this is actually a piece of paper I folded over. Come on, where's the tape edge? Trying not to flip this over. And then this could be a really cute little like place setting, or it could be a note card that you sent to somebody. So yeah, if I wanted to, maybe in the middle here, I could take a pen. And now I have to find a pen. Here we go. Let's say this is Mogi's setting. I just wrote her name in here. And keeping in mind, I do not have good lettering skills. But how cute would that be, sitting at like a little table to say, here's where you're sitting. Or yeah, you could also write thank you in there, or, you know, happy Thanksgiving, or whatever it is that you're celebrating or why you're sending the card. Same thing in these. All right, well, thank you everyone for taking the time today. I will tell you guys, I'm in the next couple weeks until about Christmas. I think next week we'll still have a class. And I think I'm going to be doing a Viva specific class. But then after that, I think I might need to transition to an every other week, at least until Christmas, just to make sure that I've got enough time to deal with everything. And then probably come the new year, I'll be have plenty of time again. So we'll be doing weekly classes again. So stay tuned. I will always announce them and make the live events and things like that for when we do. I appreciate everybody's time and I hope everybody had fun. And if you want to send me pictures, feel free to do that. Have a great day.